He was so careful to wear gloves. He did not want to leave any fingerprints behind. What he did not know, what many perpetrators never realize, is that wearing gloves does not make you invisible. It makes you leave your fingerprints inside the glove. Her purse was still there. Her phone was still there. Her heart medication was still there. Her car keys. The shoes she wore every single day. And she was gone. Taken in her pajamas in the middle of the night from her home in the Catalina Foothills north of Tucson. January 31st became February 1st, and 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie did not come back from that night. When her family arrived the next day, they found the back doors propped open. They found blood on the front doorstep. They found the doorbell camera yanked from the wall. And they found a phone sitting inside a home that her daughter Savannah would later describe in an interview that stopped the country as making no sense at all. That phone is still a question. And tonight the question is the center of everything. Because a phone used every single day by a living person is covered in that person's fingerprints. Every swipe. Every tap. Every time you pick it up and put it down. Your prints are on it. They have to be. They cannot not be. Unless someone wiped them off. And wiping fingerprints off a phone is not an accident. It is not a passive event. It is a decision. A deliberate physical action taken by a person who understood exactly what they were removing and exactly why. The question of whose fingerprints are on Nancy Guthrie's phone is one of the most precise and most powerful forensic questions in this entire case. And it has not been publicly answered. Hit that like button right now. Share this video immediately because Nancy Guthrie has still not been found, and every share keeps this case in front of new eyes. Subscribe to Black Veil Crime Files with notifications on, because in a case moving this fast you cannot afford to miss a single update. And stay until the very last second of this video, because the forensic framework we are building tonight is the one that will make every future development in this case make sense the moment it happens. Let us go through the evidence properly. Part 1, the scene, not a recap but a forensic inventory. If you have been following this case, you already know what Nancy Guthrie's family found when they went to check on her the morning of February 1st. But there is a difference between knowing a fact and understanding its forensic weight. So let us go through it properly. Not as a recap. As a forensic inventory. Because each item left behind is not just evidence that something went wrong. Each item is a surface. Each item is a potential data point. And each item either confirms something, contradicts something, or sits in silence waiting for a question that has not been asked loudly enough yet. Nancy Guthrie was last seen on the evening of January 31st, dropped off at her Catalina Foothills home by her son-in-law Tommaso Cian at approximately 9:50 in the evening. He is the last person confirmed to have seen her. She did not show up the following morning for a virtual church service she had planned to watch with a friend. The family was notified. Her sister Annie and Tommaso went to check on her. They found the back doors propped open. They assumed briefly that maybe paramedics had come in the night. Maybe she had suffered a medical episode and been taken out. It was the only thing that made immediate sense. And then they found the blood on the front doorstep. Savannah Guthrie described that moment in her first on-air interview since her mother disappeared. Blood on the doorstep. The back doors open. The doorbell camera yanked off the wall. And inside, an immaculate home with no signs of struggle, no signs of assault, everything in its place. Except Nancy. Her phone was inside that home. Her purse was inside that home. Her car keys. Her daily heart medication and blood pressure prescription. The medication she needed to stay alive. Her shoes. And she was gone in her pajamas. Let that picture settle for a moment, because it matters to everything that follows. A person who leaves under their own power does not leave their medication behind. A person who is taken does not get to choose what they bring. Part 2, the 2 timestamps that define the window. In 2026, a phone is not just a communication device. It is a location tracker, a biometric record, a digital archive of a person's communications, movements, financial activity, contacts, calendar, health data, and behavioral patterns. When a phone stays behind at the scene of a disappearance, investigators have to ask why. And when that phone is in the custody of a federal investigation, they also have to ask what is on it, what has been done to it, and whose fingerprints are on it. Nancy Guthrie has a pacemaker. Her Apple Watch was synced to that pacemaker. According to the official timeline released by the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the doorbell camera disconnected at 1:47 in the morning on February 1st. Approximately 41 minutes later at 2:28 in the morning, Nancy's pacemaker disconnected from the monitoring application on her phone. Those two timestamps, the camera going offline and the pacemaker going silent, marked the window in which Nancy was taken. The Apple Watch stayed behind. Her phone stayed behind. Her pacemaker went with her. And at 2:28 in the morning it stopped communicating. 41 minutes. That is the window. 1:47 to 2:28. Everything that happened to Nancy Guthrie happened inside those 41 minutes. The hearing aids left behind present a specific investigative nuance that has not been clearly addressed in most coverage. One pair of Nancy's hearing aids was found at the home. But reporting has since noted the possibility that Nancy may have had a second pair. Modern hearing aids pair via Bluetooth with a smartphone and register location data on the paired phone. The phone stayed behind. But if a second pair of hearing aids was on Nancy when she was taken, the last known location data from those devices becomes significant evidence. And the pair found at the home remains a forensic surface. A physical object that may carry fingerprint evidence relevant to this investigation. Part 3, The Masked Man and the DNA that has no name. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has confirmed FBI involvement and FBI custody of physical evidence from Nancy Guthrie's property. That confirmation is public. What has not been publicly confirmed is the specific catalog of what was taken into custody, what forensic analysis has been completed, what that analysis returned, and what it ruled in or ruled out. DNA testing in this case was sent to DNA Labs International, a private laboratory in Florida. Early in the investigation there were reported tensions between the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI over evidence access and processing protocols. Those logistics matter when evaluating how quickly specific forensic results were available. Here is what we do know about the DNA. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed publicly on February 13 that new DNA samples from Nancy's home were sent for testing and that the DNA was not from Nancy Guthrie or anyone in close contact with her. But the fuller picture of that DNA is more complex than the headline suggests. The DNA recovered from the property is what forensic scientists describe as a mixed and partial sample. Meaning it contains genetic material from more than one person. Which makes isolating a single usable profile extremely difficult. It could not be matched through CODIS, the FBI's national DNA database. Investigators subsequently announced they were turning to investigative genetic genealogy, a process that builds family trees from ancestry database matches to narrow down the identity of an unknown DNA donor. Forensic genealogist Cece Moore, who has helped law enforcement identify suspects in more than 300 cold cases, explained publicly that a mixed sample is one of the hardest scenarios to work with and that identifying this DNA could take up to a year. The confirmed picture is this. There is biological material in that home that did not come from Nancy Guthrie or anyone expected to be there. It has not been matched to anyone. It cannot currently be used for a standard database comparison because of the sample's complexity. Investigators believe it may belong to the suspect, but they do not know that definitively. And that unidentified biological material sits alongside the doorbell camera footage of an armed masked man outside Nancy's front door in the early hours of February 1st. Footage that FBI Director Kash Patel released publicly on February 10th. The footage showed the suspect with a holstered pistol and a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack. Footage recovered from back-end residual data even though the camera itself had been removed from the wall. Both the DNA and the surveillance footage confirm one thing beyond any reasonable dispute. Someone was at that property who should not have been there. Someone planned this. Someone went to that house with equipment, with preparation, and with intent. And that someone left biological traces and a visual record but no name. Part 4, the phone, and the question that 6,000 people recognized immediately. At 10:02 in the morning on March 31st, a social media investigator posted a question about the Nancy Guthrie case. By the time this production flagged it, that post had accumulated nearly 6,000 views. Not engagement across a broad algorithm. 6,000 views on a single question posted in the middle of the night. The question was short. It was not a theory. It was not an accusation. It was a forensic question, and it deserves to be treated as one. Whose fingerprints are on Nancy Guthrie's phone? 6,000 people recognized the weight of that question immediately. Because once you ask whose fingerprints are on the phone, you have to ask the inverse. What does it mean if there are no fingerprints at all? A phone that a person uses every day is covered in fingerprints. Not metaphorically. Literally. The oils from human skin transfer to glass and metal surfaces with every touch. Every swipe across the screen. Every press of the side button. Every time you pick the phone up, place it in your pocket, or set it down. You leave a print. Multiple prints. Layered prints. A phone actively used for weeks by a single person will have that person's fingerprints on essentially every touchable surface. Nancy Guthrie's phone was not sitting in a drawer. She was in active contact with people, managing her daily life, living in her home. That phone was in her hand. The only reason a forensic technician would find no prints on a phone in regular use is if the phone was wiped down after the last time the owner used it. If fingerprints exist belonging only to Nancy, that is consistent with normal use. If fingerprints exist belonging to someone else in addition to Nancy, that tells a different story. And if there are no fingerprints at all, if the phone is completely clean, that tells us something the other two outcomes cannot. A completely clean phone with zero fingerprint residue is not the expected outcome. It requires explanation. No experienced forensic examiner would treat it as simply a bad processing day. Part 5, how phone fingerprint analysis actually works. Understanding the mechanics of phone fingerprint analysis is essential to evaluating what any forensic result on Nancy's phone would actually mean. This is not simple dusting the way television represents it. Modern smartphone forensics involves multiple overlapping techniques, and each has different applications and different limitations. Traditional latent fingerprint recovery uses aluminum powder or chemical reagents to develop prints left by skin oils on hard surfaces. On a glass smartphone screen, this is one of the more favorable substrates for latent print recovery. Glass holds prints well. The challenge with phones is that they are handled in so many orientations and with so many different grip styles that the prints present are often overlapping, partial, or smeared. Beyond the screen, the frame of a phone, its aluminum or stainless steel edges, buttons, the camera ring, also holds latent prints, though recovery rates vary by material. The charging port area, the corners, the physical buttons. All of these are surfaces that a person regularly grips. A forensic examiner photographs all surfaces first, then applies development techniques appropriate to each material, then lifts, scans, and runs any developed prints through the National Identification System to check for matches. If the prints match the victim, that is noted. If the prints match someone already in the database, that generates an immediate result. If the prints match someone not in the database, they are preserved as unknown exemplars for later comparison against prints from specific individuals. If no prints are developed at all, there are two primary explanations. Either the phone was deliberately wiped with something that removed the skin oil deposits, or the phone was handled exclusively while wearing gloves. These are not the same scenario, but they arrive at the same result. A phone with no recoverable prints. A complete absence of usable prints on a phone belonging to someone who used it daily would be forensically remarkable. It would require explanation. And no experienced forensic examiner would treat it as an accident. Part 6, what a wiped phone would mean, following the logic. Now consider what this investigation already has. Doorbell footage of an armed masked man at that front door. The camera itself was removed. The back doors were propped open with flower pots from Nancy's own garden. Deliberate. Specific. Planned. These are not the actions of someone improvising. These are the actions of someone who thought about what they were doing before they did it. A person operating at that level of planning would also think about what surfaces they touched. Which makes the question of what is on that phone not just forensically significant but behaviorally significant. Let us follow the logic of what a wiped phone would mean. Not as a confirmed fact. As a hypothetical that any investigator would be required to think through because it is the most consequential of the possible scenarios. If Nancy's phone was wiped between the time she was last using it and the time her family arrived on February 1st, that wipe was performed by someone. Nancy did not do it. Nancy is not present. Wiping a phone clean of fingerprints is not an accident and it is not a passive event. It requires deliberate physical action. A cloth, a cleaning material, a systematic effort to remove skin oil deposits from every surface of the device. Why would someone wipe a phone they were leaving behind? The answer is not complicated. You wipe a phone to remove evidence that you touched it. Not evidence that you used it. The digital contents of the phone require completely different action to eliminate. A factory reset, encryption key destruction, or a remote wipe command are what clear digital contents. Physically wiping the exterior removes one specific thing. The biometric record of who held it. Someone who wiped the exterior of Nancy's phone without clearing its digital contents either panicked and acted incompletely, prioritized one type of evidence removal over another, or the digital contents had already been cleared before the physical wipe occurred. A combined wipe, physical exterior cleaned and digital contents cleared, would be a deliberate multi-step process. Calculated. Not reactive. Here is what makes this question even more precise. Wiping a phone exterior does not guarantee a complete forensic absence. Microscopic ridge detail can survive in seams around port openings, in the gaps around buttons. Alternate light sources and forensic enhancement techniques can sometimes develop faint residual ridge patterns on glass even after a surface wipe. If the laboratory looked and found nothing, found a completely clean phone with zero fingerprint residue, that absence would itself be a documented finding. Part 7, The Behavioral Picture, a person who planned everything. Now connect this to what investigators have confirmed about the scene. The suspect on that doorbell camera arrived prepared. He was armed. He carried a pack. He disconnected the camera. He used Nancy's own flower pots to prop open the back doors. This is a person who thought ahead. A person who thinks ahead about cameras and door access also thinks ahead about what they touch and what they leave behind. The person who came to Nancy Guthrie's home that night removed the camera from the wall. That is active evidence destruction. They disconnected the recording device before it could capture clearer footage. They propped the back doors open with objects found on the property, Nancy's own flower pots, suggesting they had either been inside previously to know the layout or they took time inside the property to position those items deliberately. The interior of the home was in immaculate condition. No signs of a struggle. No signs of assault inside. Blood appeared outside on the porch at the point of exit. This behavioral picture is not consistent with a panicked improvised crime. It is consistent with someone who planned, who prepared, who thought about evidence before, during, and after. A person in a ski mask at a crime scene is thinking about cameras. A person thinking about cameras is thinking about forensic traces. A person thinking about forensic traces is thinking about what surfaces they touch. Incomplete sanitization is actually informative in investigations. If a person wiped the phone specifically but left DNA elsewhere in the home, that tells investigators something about what that person prioritized. Did they use the phone in a way that would reveal their involvement? Did they access it to look at something or delete something and then wipe the exterior to remove the trace of their hands? These are the specific forensic questions that investigators build into a timeline of events. Part 8, What the FBI knows and what the public does not. There is something that intellectual honesty requires acknowledging before we go further. The FBI knows things we do not. That is not a criticism of the public investigation. It is the reality of how federal evidence works. The investigators assigned to this case have access to the full forensic reports, the digital extraction results from Nancy's phone, the print analysis, the pacemaker data, the financial records, and every interview transcript from every person questioned. We have public confirmations and a few specific disclosures. That gap between what they know and what the public knows is where all of the legitimate questions live. There is a real and genuinely plausible possibility that the FBI has already answered the fingerprint question internally. They may know exactly whose prints are on that phone. They may have developed a print, run it for identification, and that result is part of an active investigation that cannot be disclosed without compromising an arrest or indictment. In that scenario, the public silence makes complete sense, even as it is difficult to sit with. There is also the possibility that the phone had only Nancy's prints, the baseline expected outcome, and that information simply has not risen to the level of public disclosure because it tells you nothing new. A result that confirms the null hypothesis is not a press conference. But there is a third possibility. The phone had no prints. Or it had prints inconsistent with any identified individual. And that result is sitting in a federal file, and no one with the authority to compel a public response has asked for it on the record publicly. The social media investigator asked it online. 6,000 people recognized the weight of the question immediately. But a social media post does not compel a law enforcement response. A formal records request might. A congressional inquiry might. A sustained coordinated media push on that specific question might. The question has been raised. It has not been answered. Closing, the full picture and why every item left behind is a witness. Savannah Guthrie has carried this publicly in a way that few people could. She stepped away from her Today Show duties. She gave one on-air interview with her colleague that was as careful and as precise as it was heartbreaking. She disclosed specific confirmed details. The blood. The doors. The camera. She confirmed that her mother was in tremendous pain, had limited mobility, and that there was simply no scenario in which Nancy walked away on her own. Her back was very bad. On a good day she could walk down to the mailbox and come back. That precision from someone this close to the case with this much platform is itself a data point. If the fingerprint question had been answered in a way that was safe to discuss publicly, it is plausible it would have entered her statements in some form. The fact that it has not reflects the standard practice of federal investigations. Families are given parameters around what they can and cannot say publicly when disclosure could affect an ongoing prosecution. Let us bring the full confirmed picture together. Nancy Guthrie was last seen on the evening of January 31, 2026 at her Catalina Foothills home north of Tucson. At 1:47 in the morning on February 1, the doorbell camera went offline. 41 minutes later at 2:28 in the morning her pacemaker transmitted its last signal from her phone. Her family arrived around 11 that morning and found the back doors propped open, blood on the front doorstep, the camera removed from the wall, and Nancy gone in her pajamas without shoes and without medication. The FBI has physical evidence from the scene. Biological material not matching Nancy or close contacts was recovered and confirmed publicly. That material is a mixed and partial sample under analysis through forensic genealogy because it cannot be run through standard databases in its current form. The masked armed suspect from the doorbell footage has not been identified. No arrests have been made. The family has offered a $1 million reward. The investigation is ongoing. Nancy's phone has been in federal custody since the beginning. Fingerprint analysis on a smartphone is standard forensic procedure in an investigation of this severity. The results, if they exist, have not been publicly disclosed. And the inverse of the question, what it means if there are no prints at all on a phone in regular daily use, has a logical forensic answer that any examiner would recognize immediately. A phone used daily by a living person carries that person's prints. A phone with no prints was cleaned. Cleaning requires deliberate action. Deliberate action to remove fingerprint evidence is not an accident. The same question applies to the hearing aids found at the home. The same question applies to any surface that the armed and masked suspect captured on camera may have touched inside that house. The confirmed DNA, the confirmed footage, the confirmed blood, the confirmed condition of that scene all build toward a forensic picture that is more complete than the public has been told and whose critical gaps the fingerprint question sits directly inside. At some point in a courtroom or in a press conference, the answer to what was found on that phone is going to be part of the public record. When it is, everything else in this case will be understood in relation to it. Every item left behind is a witness. The phone is a witness. The hearing aids are a witness. The Apple Watch is a witness. The flower pots used to prop those back doors are a witness. The blood on the front doorstep is a witness. The doorbell camera footage of a masked armed man who planned every second of what he did is a witness. And witnesses eventually get to speak. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. From January 31st to today, that is time her family cannot recover. That no press conference can fill. That no reward can make right unless it brings her home. We keep asking. We keep watching. And we do not stop until she is found. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what the forensic evidence in this case actually means, share it right now. Leave a comment below and tell me what detail in this forensic inventory you cannot stop thinking about. Tell me what you think is on that phone. Tell me what that 41-minute window means to you. Tell me what you believe happened between 1:47 and 2:28 on the morning of February 1st. Subscribe to Black Veil Crime Files with notifications on. Nancy Guthrie's case is moving. And when the next development breaks, you need to be here. This is Black Veil Crime Files. I will see you in the next one. Blackheart.